Entering the Pat Mayo Experience.
Pat Mayo Experience. Pat Mayo Experience. Pat Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by DraftKings 2022 NFL Free Agency Recap. Fantasy spin. We're going to go team by team, player by player, position by position, and let you know the info in case you missed anything. Reminder to smash the like button for the episode, sub to Mayo Media Network in the comment section. Give me your favorite free agent signing, offense, defense, special teams, potentially. If you're a big Joel Pinheiro fan of the New York Jets, maybe you think that's the best signing. It's not, but maybe you think it is because you're an idiot or something. I don't know, but leave that down in the comment section. Remember to rate and review and subscribe to the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast as well. Bringing them in because this is what we do from theathletic.com at AllInKid on Twitter. One of the most accurate rankers. I'd say the most accurate ranker, but that wouldn't be accurate on my part. Now, would it, Jake Ciely?
No, it wouldn't. That's why my trophy behind me is like only this big, and Jeff's goes all the way to the floor because he is the number one. I am only number two. But together we make the most accurate number one show. And you said Joel Pinheiro. That was the pitcher. I think it isn't Eddie Pinheiro the kicker. And I don't even care about kickers. You know that.
See, there we go. I that's how insignificant the signing is to me. The only thing I remember about Pinheiro is that wasn't he the one who dunked it off the upright for the Bears? Then that was it for them?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I don't know. You think I would remember all the missed kicks.
He used to kick for the Bears. I remember that at one point, yeah. So not Joel Pinheiro. You are correct. He was a soft-throwing pitcher for, I want to say, the Angels or the Cubs like 10 years ago.
He actually writes for The Athletic. Nano brought him on. He writes some relief pitcher articles for baseball.
Of course he did. Who's going to get you your holds in your fantasy baseball league? And a bunch of 78-year-olds are like, I need my holds. I hate this. Anyway, let's talk about football. Jacksonville. What are they doing?
Spending a lot of money? A hell of a lot of money. This is what happens when you're a crap franchise. We'll be honest about it. Like, the only way you get people there is you overpay. We can look at it. You can look at it two different ways. You can say one is what they've been doing is bananas. Like, there's nobody out there that's like, oh, this makes a ton of sense. On the flip side, for fantasy purposes, which we're here to talk about, there are things where you can look at it and say, all right, this is intriguing. This looks interesting. I think you could say Christian Kirk overpaid, shouldn't be top 3, let alone top 10 in the league. We can all like Christian Kirk. No, he doesn't deserve that kind of money. Zay Jones, I actually think is more egregious, even though he got paid significantly less. Evan Ingram, sure, fine. Yes, you go back to his rookie season with the Giants, a lot of fun. But I think what it comes all down to, Pat, is they also address the offensive line. This is just, hey, no Urban Meyer. This team did everything it could possibly do. Like, if you gave me a blueprint and said, hey, this is how you screw up a generational quarterback talent in his rookie season, the Jaguars did that. And I think that's what we're looking at here is, yeah, Kirk, fine. Okay, Marvin Jones still relevant. All about. I think it really just comes down to Trevor Lawrence could get to QB1 status in 2022.
Yeah, especially if he keeps running, and that was going to be the big thing. These offensive weapons, I really don't care about, to tell you the truth. Like, if we were to do wide receiver rankings today, knowing that there's been no cuts or trades or anything like that, so Chenault is still technically on the team. Marvin Jones is still on this team. Laquan Treadwell was actually their best receiver last year. I don't know if Dan Arnold's still around or not. I assume he's not going to be around if Evan Ingram was brought in. But like, how high would you rank Christian Kirk? Like, what's the ceiling on Christian Kirk in your rankings? Technically he could be wide receiver 1 because he plays football and is on the field catching balls and potential touchdowns. That's probably an outlier situation. Like, I couldn't imagine drafting any of these Jags receivers before like wide receiver 40, 45.
Yeah, I probably, if like off the top of my head, would probably have Kirk, what first came to mind, like mid-30s. I could even see it a little bit lower. And I talked about it with stepmom Lauren on my show on Tuesday, and we both said the same thing. It's like, I don't know, there's going to be a huge gap between Kirk and Jones. So I'll wait 3-4 rounds and take Marvin Jones because everybody's going to be taking Kirk, because we know this about Kirk is the same thing I said on your show, Pat, I said on my show, I said in articles. The similarities, it was a very easy, like, people always want comps coming out of college, and there's never like, okay, this player is 100% going to be this player. But I always said the easiest one for Kirk is Sterling Shepard. Really good slot receiver. Can play outside. You don't want him to always play outside. He's always better in the slot and with somebody else. is Marvin Jones enough of somebody else, and how much are they going to kick him outside? Does Zay Jones signing mean they're going to run a lot of three wide, and Kirk will be able to be in the slot a lot? So you go down the road, and I just say, you know what? Let everybody else draft Kirk. I'm going to wait and take Marvin Jones at the discount and celebrate.
Even then, you probably don't even want Marvin Jones. I think that Lawrence, to kind of quote you, sometimes you just want to buy the cow, don't buy the steak. Just get the guy who's
it's buy the cake, not the icing.
Well, it's like this. It's the same sort of analogy, I suppose. But
I like yours too.
Take the guy at the helm who's going to accrue all these fantasy points distributed between like 8 separate guys, and we still have the question mark about what's going on in this backfield. Like I have, and this is a personal situation to me, as a red shirt keeper this year, I have my guy and your guy, Travis Etienne, as a 9th round keeper with no penalty attached to him whatsoever. He's like a free keep for me as long as I use a 9th round pick. Is he going to be the guy in this backfield, or are we dealing with another year of James Robinson?
I think, James Robinson's coming off a significant injury too. Yeah. We all know that. And so is he ready for week 1? Is Etienne the guy? As Etienne, I think it'll be really telling what this team thinks depending on what happens in the draft. So, if they get a 6th rounder, okay, they're probably going to try and see what Etienne has and think that James Robinson's going to be fine. And I think you could look at a backfield that's very much like what we just saw with Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon last year. Like neither one of them, and I say that to say, like, neither one of them is going to really push ahead of the other by a large margin. You're going to have weeks where they're both RB2s, one week where one goes off and the other doesn't. But I don't think they're going to be like top 15 each, like we just saw with Gordon and Williams. I think this is more like in the 20s. Maybe more so. You know what? Arizona might be a better comparison when Edmonds was healthy and something like that. So to get that RB1-2 value, you probably need somebody getting that touchdown volume, and that might still be James Robinson if healthy. So I think it's just a question we don't know as of today. We're going to have to see. And the biggest part of it is the coaching staff has, this as we've seen so many times before, coaching staff has 0 ties to the guys who are there right now. So they might, like I said, if they draft a running back in the 3rd round, I'd be legitimately concerned for Etienne and James Robinson.
Evan Ingram, tight end, inside the top 12 or well outside the top 12?
I'd say closer to top 12 than well outside of it, but that's just because of the tight end position. And honestly, Evan Ingram was done no favors with Jason Garrett, that offense. I mean, it's crazy to say, but this is true. No Daniel Jones hurt him because just look at who they turned to. And not that Daniel Jones is that great, but that offense had problems up and down, everything. Like, there's just so many things. And there is still hope with Evan Ingram. He is a matchup problem. We saw it in his rookie season, and we saw flashes of it since then. So it's easier to get to top 12 than for somebody of his talent to just completely fall out and be like a top, I'd say, tight end 25. I would put the odds on more likely to be top 12 than 25th.
It was funny to look at Evan Ingram's numbers in terms of average depth of target going back to his rookie season through now, as it's gone down every single year he's been in the league. Now, obviously, like you mentioned, no Daniel Jones and Mike Glennon is throwing you the ball. That could have something to do with it. No offensive line could have something to do with it. More playmakers in that offense has something to do with it, and different schemes at different times has a lot to do with it as well. Or it could be a loss of athleticism too, where he was a super freak athlete playing the tight end position, really playing slot receiver coming out of college. Now we're like 6 years later, maybe he's lost a step or two. But I do think that the increase in protection for Trevor Lawrence with these offensive line upgrades is going to allow him to maybe throw the ball a bit more downfield than we saw last season. That's kind of the inverse of what's going on in Miami at the moment, because they've signed all these guys, running backs, receivers, yet have yet to address the offensive line, which, by looking at the numbers, is their number one concern?
I would still say, yeah. I mean, is it or is it now still? Either way, yeah, number one concern, yeah.
It was their number one concern. It still is their number one concern. Yeah. And they legit have not done anything to address this so far. What they've done is sign 3 running backs. So you have your guys that were there anyway are just everyone is still, Salvon Ahmed's probably still on this roster somewhere. They pick up
Alex still right now.
Yeah, they pick up Alec Ingold from the Raiders. So you're probably going to see him play the
fullback.
You're going to, basically, they're going to try to replicate, at least with these personnel decisions, from what I'm seeing, is what they did in San Francisco. They're going to have a fullback offense and run a myriad of running backs out of the backfield, because they signed Raheem Mostert, who's going to be very familiar with the system, with Mike McDaniel now as the head coach, and they bring in Chase Edmonds, who doesn't really seem to fit I would think with what they want to do, like who's the comp to Chase Edmonds from the San Francisco offense? It doesn't feel like there's anyone. Yeah.
No, interestingly enough, I mean, if you had to, like, so not now, but like coming out of college, you would have said like Elijah Mitchell, who like pass catching running back, which everybody expected out of college. It's actually very similar to what happened to Antonio Gibson. It's like, hey, this guy basically played wide receiver, and then it's all of a sudden like, no, we're just gonna run him, and barely use him in the passing game. So I'm with you. Like as looking as of today, like the Chase Edmonds was intriguing. Like, hey, look at the money they gave him. They're obviously using him probably as the lead, and I even before Mostert came in, I was hesitant to like buy into Edmonds because there was going to be so much hype and so much excitement because Mike McDaniel is going to do what Shanahan has always done, and this is the guy that he brought in, and blah, blah, blah. And then what do we usually have every single year with San Francisco, Pat? Every single year, it's the guy that it was what you used to say about the Ravens. It ended up being about the 49ers. It's always like the one that doesn't get drafted. Like nobody was taking Elijah Mitchell until late in drafts. Like Trace Sermon was still going. And then all of a sudden it was Elijah Mitchell, and he probably still wasn't even going in most drafts. So if we're following course here, it's not Mostert or Edmonds. It might just be whichever running back they still keep on the roster, like Ahmed. But I'm not worried about Ingold. Like I said, the juice chick thing, it makes sense. I think Mostert's the lead-ish until he gets hurt. Like he's going to be fun for the 3 or 4 games, and then it's going to be Edmonds. But that's, I think right now the problem is I think everybody's involved until somebody goes down. And I think that's what we're looking at. That was always the intrigue with the 49ers is, yeah, it's fun. Everybody's productive. But the few times when everybody's healthy, it's kind of a frustrating situation to deal with.
Yeah, it's the Ouroboros situation where the snake is eating its own tail, where you just can't get ahead in any sort of situation. Watch somehow that Myles Gaskin is actually a consistent positive fantasy contributor this year when literally no one ends up drafting the guy because all of a sudden it turns out he needed a fullback to block for him the entire time. The reason I mention Ingold is it just decreases the amount of 3 wide receiver sets because you know that they're going to run Gesicki. Now you can call him a receiver, but then you're playing fewer tight end sets. And we know in that San Francisco offense, they like to run a lot of 2 tight end sets, whether it be with Dwelly and Kittle. One guy's a primary blocker. One guy's going to go run routes. And Miami might have like 58 tight ends on the roster by the time the season comes along because that's just what Miami does. They'll have like some iteration of the same guy, whether it be Durham Smythe or Adam Shaheen or Mac Hollins. All of the other guys who aren't Mike Gesicki that when they catch attention, you're like, yes, Gesicki. No, that's not Gesicki. And the only one you can tell that's not him is Mac Hollins because he has the hair coming out of the helmet. And he wears 86. So he's just slightly off a little bit. You're like, that's a really big receiver. Oh, no, that's Mac Hollins. He has the dual eligibility in fantasy if you really want to. And then they bring back Preston Williams in the receiving game.
Yeah.
And they bring in Cedric Wilson.
There you go.
I can't figure out outside of Jalen Waddle who I would actually want to draft on this team.
I don't know that there's much else. I mean, Gesicki's going to be intriguing because tight end position is the tight end position. Like even if he has the inconsistent.
But won't he just get lost in the shuffle with all of these guys? Like he was getting lost anyway in the shuffle. And if they don't improve the offensive line, Tua's still not going to have time to throw.
No, but I mean, you talked about like the depth of target with Evan Ingram, and you also have the opportunity for Gesicki. Just you look at more of. All right, Waddle, Gesicki, can we get open quickly? Gesicki still has that. That's the whole reason he was trying to like say, "Oh, I'm a wide receiver." He still has that talent. I'm not disagreeing with you at all. Like I've been anti-Gesicki for a while because of exactly what you're talking about. When a lot of people had him this year, you can go back and look. People are calling him like breakout for 2021, and I was like, no way. Especially for the fact they added Waddle, because if you looked at Gesicki last year, one of the highest opportunity shares, that's including target share and then like routes run and all that type of stuff, opportunities overall, and still was even barely, I think he was still just outside the top 5 tight ends in fantasy production with all the injuries and all this. Before that was 2020 is what I'm talking about. And that's why I was like, you bring in Waddle, who also plays a ton out of the slot, and Gesicki played a ton out of the slot the year before. I'm with you. And I'm saying that to say, like, now I'm back around of like saying, I wouldn't downgrade him. I think we just look at him exactly as he was last year, and maybe because everybody's worried that he's just going to get lost in the shuffle, he becomes a low tight end 1 value. Like, I'm not going to target him, but if 12th, 13th round, fine. I'll take him as my tight end, mostly because I just want to avoid what I've been saying, like everybody wants the dead zone of running backs. I'll call them the dead zone of tight ends. I basically don't want any tight end from like tight end 6 to tight end 10, because that's every single year. That's a mistake. But the only one, to answer your question overall, the only one I want is Jalen Waddle. Everybody else, I think, is just going to be a cluster, honestly.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. Washington trades for Carcinio Wentz. That's always fun when you can trade picks for Carson Wentz and pay him a ton of money, including his roster bonus. And then all of a sudden they swerve last second. I saw the Antonio Gibson people on Twitter being like, oh, our time is now. Basically like, ba-ba-da-ba. Like John Cena was there. It was perfect for anyone who had any investment in Antonio Gibson because J.D. McKissic was going to Buffalo. But apparently Buffalo couldn't sign him, so they just signed a bunch of better players instead. Although Paul was pretty excited about J.D. McKissic going to Buffalo because that means you get rid of Zach Moss, have an actual pass catcher. You don't have to rely on like Matt Breida or Patrick DeMarco to catch balls out of the backfield. But I don't really think this does too much to Antonio Gibson because he was able to operate without McKissic last year. Once he got himself right and over that shin injury, he was excellent. So I have a feeling it was more or less the shin injury that was holding him back most of the year.
I agree, and I wasn't upgrading him without McKissic, and I'm not downgrading him with McKissic. McKissic was a non-factor in my value of Antonio Gibson. I have him as a low-end RB1, high, like inside the top 10, lower, so maybe mid-low RB1. Really what it comes down to is we even saw last year, and yeah, there were some times involving that injury you're talking about, but Washington and Ron Rivera still wanted to use somebody. They used Jarrett Patterson as a pass catcher sometimes. And we're talking about Antonio Gibson, who was primarily more of a wide receiver in college, and they still wanted to use somebody else. McKissic's back. They're going to want to use McKissic. And I'm saying that to say, if McKissic left, that's why I didn't move Antonio Gibson up. I was like, he's still going to share. They might draft somebody like Cook, Dalvin Cook's brother. So I was in the fact of 6, 7, 8 range. To be honest with you, if they went full bell cow with them, yeah, we could talk top 5. We could talk potentially knocking on that tier 1 door. But I just think this is always where he's going to be, which is fine. That's good. This is what, is we can keep him healthy and get this production kind of like a Joe Mixon season. Maybe by attrition and staying healthy, he finishes RB5. But yeah, McKissic there or not, zero effect on how I feel about Gibson. He is a great running back, and he's just stays as a great running back.
I did enjoy the commentary that if J.D. McKissic is gone, like you said, it's like, oh, well, Antonio Gibson's just going to get 40 carries a game. It's like, it doesn't quite work. They might sign someone. They were using Wendell Smallwood at points last year as well, along with Jared Patterson. So they got other guys on the roster they can turn to spell him from time to time. What do you make of this offense with Wentz? Like, how does that affect McLaurin? Does Curtis Samuel have some value now that hopefully he's going to be recovered from this groin injury that legitimately plagued him all 18 weeks last year? Couldn't even suit up half the games. We know that he was an intriguing idea last year with Rivera coming over from Carolina, the way that he'll touch the ball out of the backfield, maybe take away from Gibson a little bit in that McKissic role, and run these really short A-dot routes that put him in space, but he could be a PPR sensation. That was sort of the idea behind it. Now he's kind of off the radar with everyone. Do you think this team is better fantasy-wise with Wentz than it was with Heineke?
No. I think there's a higher ceiling. If you look at Heineke and Wentz of recent years, and we'll get to it too, that Roethlisberger actually comes into a similar conversation to this, it's not really an upgrade. Honestly, it's not really a downgrade. The only thing is that we know that Wentz, if he could ever even get back to 90% of that one amazing season, which everybody, let's just be honest, these teams keep trying to unlock the Wentz we saw the 1 year when everybody was like, oh my God, we have the new top 5 quarterback in the NFL. He's going to be amazing.
Does anyone remember that he blew his knee out that season and his big thing was being like greased up deaf guy from Family Guy? No one could tackle him. It was just like, here's 8 guys submerging Carson Wentz in the pocket. Then all of a sudden he's like, bloop, and he's just out. And he can't do that anymore. Now he just tries to throw it with his left hand backwards.
I don't think I've ever heard anybody reference that in a long time. That was a good one. The image immediately comes to mind. That's a great image, by the way. So, yes, that was part of his game. That's part of his threat. I know we're not talking Russell Wilson right now, but that's part of, for fantasy purposes, why I'm not overly moving Russell Wilson way up my rankings, because he doesn't run anymore. Carson Wentz, you take that away a little bit. That's the concern too about Daniel Jones and the head injury, and is he going to want to run less and take away that dimension and potentially force him to be more in the pocket, which is what we're seeing. It's very similar to this Carson Wentz that you force him to be in the pocket all the time. It's just not as good as a quarterback. He never really was. That's, as you mentioned, part of that is what helped him take that next level. So Carson Wentz, the one thing he has over Heineke is the touchdown to interception ratio. A little bit reckless, or less reckless, but Heineke's recklessness is kind of what we like for fantasy because he's going to take chances, he's going to take shots. So if you have the ball a little bit more, if you turn it over a little bit less, if Carson Wentz can get like a little bit improvement over last year, the ceiling's a little bit higher, but I just don't think McLaurin being a wide receiver 1 is ever in the cards with this kind of quarterback and this kind of offense. So yes, there's a ceiling for more, but as of today, I just think it's like a pretty much a net neutral, copy paste Washington from last year and similar results this year.
And yeah, it wasn't even so much the running for Wentz that it was for me. It was his ability to extend plays and continue to look downfield
Right.
and maybe take off from time to time. I mean, getting 3 or 4 rushing touchdowns a year isn't nothing. That's great. But he wasn't piling up like 500 yards on the ground. It's very akin to what Roethlisberger was able to do for such a prolonged period of time until he just couldn't anymore. Just shaking off defensive linemen, keeping the play going, and then all of a sudden guys are wide open down the field. It was a big thing with Russell Wilson too. I mean, Doug Baldwin wasn't a good deep threat. He just had a lot of deep catches because Russ would extend plays, shake guys off. People just lose track of Doug Baldwin down the field. He'd just be wide open. And that made him a great pairing and a stack with Russell Wilson to begin with, but it just made him a good receiver. He was able to do that, and Russ would know where he was. Mitch Trubisky signs with the Pittsburgh Steelers. They also re-signed Haskins. I actually think this is an upgrade for them. I think this offense is going to be better with Mitch Trubisky. Not that I think that he's really any good. I just happen to think that he's better than 2021 Ben Roethlisberger. I don't feel like that's an outrageous statement.
No, so I'm glad you said that because I'm going to take it one step further, Pat. Is I actually dug into the numbers and I said, you know what? We all know 2021 Ben Roethlisberger was not that good. So I said, let's take Trubisky's career. And I was like, all right, let's see if we can include 2020 because that 2020 Roethlisberger wasn't that good either. Numbers are still a little bit worse. I'm like, hey, maybe we can get a third year here. Numbers still a little bit worse. And I went to fourth year. That's when it finally stopped. And then I looked. And so the past 3 seasons for Roethlisberger versus Trubisky, almost identical completion percentages, 64 to 64.6. Yards per attempt, significantly better for Trubisky. Air yards per attempt, super significantly better, 8.13 to 6.64. The touchdown to interception ratio is where Roethlisberger has him, 2.2 to 1.7. But here was the most intriguing one. Everybody's like, Trubisky can't throw. He doesn't know how to throw to his wide receivers. Can't throw left. Blah, 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 blah. Off-target percentage from True Media, so basically when the quarterback is throwing uncatchable balls, essentially. 11.7 for Ben Roethlisberger, 6.9 for Trubisky's career. The past 3 years have been worse for Roethlisberger. And I'm not, for everybody out there, I'm not saying to go draft Trubisky. I'm not saying everybody's going to be better now with Pittsburgh. I'm just saying it's not a downgrade. I'm not downgrading Deontay Johnson. And as of right now, I'm not downgrading Claypool, and I'm not downgrading Freiermuth. And actually, he likes to throw to the running backs a little bit more than Ben Roethlisberger does, so I'm not downgrading Najee Harris. The only thing that would make me downgrade a little bit, Pat, is if Juju Smith-Schuster comes back, and then Juju Smith-Schuster and Claypool I would be concerned about, because Trubisky's very valuable in 2 wide receivers. You start adding a third dimension, and that's where things start to get a little haywire.
I think you can look at it one of 2 ways. That Trubisky may have been buried in a bad system with Matt Nagy, and that didn't play to his strengths.
True.
And maybe he went and saw what happened with Brian Dable and Josh Allen in Buffalo, learned a little bit there. Maybe he's better now, or maybe he was always okay and never reached the potential that he was going to be at. I don't think that anyone's saying that he's going to be a top 5 quarterback, or even a top 10 quarterback, or a fucking 15 quarterback in football. But be competent. Be able to use your legs, extend plays, and throw the ball deep downfield. The issue would be is that maybe this offense was so tailored to Ben that we really haven't seen what Pittsburgh can do outside of Ben Roethlisberger and playing specifically to his strengths and designing an offense specifically catered to him. Maybe they can, and maybe it won't be that big of a deal. But now Trubisky has to walk into a brand new offense, and the team likely has to create a brand new offense. Then you have the favorites that he's going to play. Is he just going to throw the ball to Deontay Johnson 17 times a game? Maybe he likes Claypool. Maybe he likes Freiermuth. Maybe he likes Juju, depending on where he ends up going. So I think you have to factor that sort of. I think it's only downside for Deontay Johnson because I think he was so safe, so stable, and so much of it was volume based. Maybe his efficiency goes up and he has a better year. I would be very dubious that the volume stays there for him as opposed to the other guys on the team. That would be my one thing on Deontay.
I'm okay with his volume unless Juju comes back. Like I completely agree with what you're saying. I think the volume of the passing game, assuming Trubisky is at least what I just talked about, at least not a downgrade, that Claypool, and then you look at their depth chart behind them. I'm sure they would probably draft somebody in later rounds or add somebody as a low cost free agent, whoever's still hanging out there. But I think that we're looking at is right now is it's a very clear two with the tight end. And the reason I went to that wide receiver, and this could kind of back up your point, is the increase to throwing to running backs. It doesn't actually come from the decrease of tight ends. They actually target their tight ends about the same, Roethlisberger and Trubisky. He targets his wide receivers a little bit less. So that's why I was concerned about the Claypool if Juju Smith-Schuster came back. And there is a world where your scenario happens. So I'm not downgrading Deontay as of today, but I'm not saying that it's a guarantee that that couldn't happen, what you just said. There could be a world where even if Juju doesn't come back, Claypool ends up being wide receiver 15 and Deontay's wide receiver 25 just because of how Trubisky plays. So, yeah, there's risk, obviously, here until we see this play out. But as of today, I'm still okay with Deontay, but I acknowledge there is definitely potential to see a downfall.
There's also the risk that Trubisky just sucks, too, and he's not good.
Of course. I mean, 100%. I mean, this is going to be like even worse than what we saw with Carson Wentz last year. There's obviously that's a realistic possibility.
Let's go to Cleveland, where they trade for Amari Cooper. They signed Jakeem Grant.
Breaking news. They are officially out on Deshaun Watson. They've been informed.
I was going to say that. We don't know the result of the Deshaun Watson trade as of the time of this recording. It does seem like he's going to New Orleans, but we don't know that for sure as of yet. Maybe we can speculate on Deshaun stuff towards the end, which will be like wildly out of date 2 hours later. So maybe we don't do that. But no Jarvis Landry, I'm guessing, for the Cleveland Browns in this scenario. We don't know who their quarterback is going to be because it's looking more and more like it's not going to be Baker.
I mean, if you're paying attention to his social media, it definitely sounds like he doesn't think it's himself anymore. I think the Watson thing, now that we just got this news while we're doing this, that they've been informed they're officially out. Sidebar, I find this so intriguing to me that Houston's in this bind. Deshaun Watson had this all legal stuff, and he's out there dictating what teams can trade. Like, this is just so baffling to me. But anyway, as an aside, they're out. So do they try to mend fences with Baker now? Because that's the problem. It's like, what do you do if it's not Baker? You're going to blow things up? Because if you're blowing things up, that's the only option you have now is you're backed into a corner where it's you get rid of him. If the Saints are the answer, maybe you'll go get Jameis. But are we going to draft a quarterback in the first round now when a lot of people, including myself, thought you might go draft a wide receiver like Burks or London? What?
There is an answer if he's healthy to this question, by the way.
What is the answer?
The Fitzmagic.
Oh, my God. I wasn't even thinking about that. Wow. So what I said a couple weeks ago is there was going to be one team when I couldn't even think of the name Musical Chairs. I said that to Jeff on my show. I was like, I couldn't think of the word musical chairs. There's going to be a team left, and it's going to be without the chair. And now it's heading towards it looked like it might be the Cleveland Browns, although the Indianapolis Colts are still kind of out there too. But I think Jameis is going to be interesting if Watson goes to the Saints. Now, if Watson goes to Atlanta, do they try? Does Cleveland or does somebody try to trade for Matt Ryan in that contract? This domino effect is going to be very intriguing. There's going to be a team left, and there's going to be a team panicking. And right now, it's looking like it might be back to the Browns, and that's what I'm saying. Like, is Baker back to being the quarterback next year? And so I bring that up to say this: Landry's not there, as you mentioned. If Baker's the quarterback, if it's Fitzpatrick, if it's a rookie or whatever it is, they're probably investing a draft pick in a even day one or day two, and there's going to be a lot of good tight end or wide receivers in day two. I'm still not overly excited about what the real truth here is. What we're probably burying the lead is Amari Cooper, and then the fact that I don't think this is a stock up for Amari Cooper. Like, if it was today and they didn't do anything else, yeah, sure, because he's going to get 27% target volume. But I think there's somebody else coming in one way or another, and I think in this offense, which is Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, and then the rest, this is a downgrade for Amari Cooper.
Top 15, top 20, top 25. What do you think is the better range for him at receiver?
25.
Okay.
He only finished in the mid-20s last year, and I know he missed a little bit of time, but I would say that I would expect similar numbers. Again, unless they shock the world and they completely ignore the wide receiver 2 position and they go in saying, we'll just figure it out if it's going to be Donovan Peoples-Jones or somebody like that. Then,
and
again,
Jakeem Grant. Don't forget about the dream, Jakeem.
Very, very underrated. Oh, by the way, there is a follow-up report as we're doing this. The Browns view Mayfield as the starter.
There we go. So expect Baker back. Austin Hooper's gone to clear that cap space, and they did end up franchising David Njoku. So is this just a situation where it's like, oh my God, it's Njoku time again? And like, he's just terrible?
Mostly because Harrison Bryant's still there, who's a dangerous threat.
All right, so let's say Dan Arnold sticks with the Jags. Would you rather go Ingram or Njoku?
Ingram.
Okay.
The tight ends. I feel like chasing tight ends in Cleveland is like what we've been doing with the Seahawks. We've been chasing the tight. Like, sure, if you took Cleveland Browns tight end, yeah, fun. If you took Seattle Seahawks tight end, yeah, fun. But it's always like 3 or 4 weeks of one guy and like, oh, this is finally happening. And then it's either injury or somebody else's turn, or they just run too many two tight end sets. And yeah, the Hooper release actually shocked me because of how much dead money it was in. And I think it was Jeremy Fowler who was reporting that that's why it wasn't going to happen. So yeah, this definitely does make Njoku more intriguing. I think. I'm trying to think like where I would take him. You know what? I'm going to change my answer, Pat. I'm going to change my answer on your side because I'm going to shoot for ceiling. And I'm going to shoot to say that like maybe Njoku finally does get to stay on the field 70+% of the time. And we finally get to see what we've always wanted to see from Njoku. At that point of drafting tight ends, I'm not trying to get tight end 10. I'm trying to get tight end 3. So I would take Njoku at that point.
Yeah, you're trying to find the guy who's winning you your league or you're cutting after 2 weeks. That's the pick.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, Jets. They did stuff. Kind of. They re-signed Joe Flacco. They tendered the legend that is Mike White. They re-signed Tevin Coleman, re-signed Braxton Berrios, signed 2 tight ends, Tyler Conklin and CJ Uzma, who's coming off that injury. So now they're playing dual tight end sets for reasons, I suppose, despite having all these receivers now at the moment too, and probably drafting a receiver at the same time. The re-signing of Coleman, I have to feel like is really good news for Michael Carter. That's the only thing that I took away from any of this is that good news for Michael Carter, good news for Elijah Moore. That's about it. Yeah,
I actually think that I don't know that the 2 tight ends is even going to happen. This is more of just kind of a sprinkling it in, and I mean Uzama and Conklin just replicate each other, and just maybe like neither one of them have a great track record. Obviously, Uzama is like a very poor track record to stay healthy.
And you know what? Also, good news for Irv Smith in Minnesota.
Oh, 100%. People seem to have forgot how excited everybody was for Irv Smith last year before that injury. Yeah, 100% about this. There's one part that you also left out is they're already addressing the offensive line, and I don't necessarily think they're even done. Could potentially see that in the draft, which is why I tweeted out Michael Carter RB1 season. Actually, it was Carter RB1, like one word type of thing, just being stupid, like everybody is.
Having to explain your tweets is like really sharp, Jake.
Well, 100%. If you saw the tweet, I didn't have to explain it, but I had to explain what I'm saying it, which again, obviously stupid tweet. Point being, you know how much I love Michael Carter. If everybody's seen the show last year when we talked rookies, if we talked that team in general, they know how much I love Michael Carter. And I said the upside for him coming out of college was Austin Eckler. Yeah, that's really what he could be. Am I putting him in Austin Eckler territory yet? Not quite, but if it happened now with what this team is coming, I think, weren't you the one that said it a few weeks ago? Don't be surprised if the Jets are significantly better, or was that me? And then you told me I sounded too much like Andrew Cust.
No, that was actually me who said that, because Cust is out on the Jets this year, which means that they're going to be rising in the rankings.
Oh, they're winning the division if he's out. Until
he gets sucked all the way back in after a week, and then they're terrible again.
Oh, so what you're telling me is like, fine. So bet them to win the division. When they start like 7-2, find somebody to buy your bet from you, and then as soon as Anarchist is back in, and then watch them like lose the last like 90% of their games.
Galaxy brain. I like the way you're thinking.
But yes, I love Michael Carter. I actually think Corey Davis could be an intriguing dart throw late, just because it was a lot of injury issues with him last year. Berrios replacing Jameson Crowder, and yeah, that's good for the real team. If Corey Davis misses time, Berrios could be very intriguing. If you look at the first 3, I think, games, and then 2 of the last 3 games from last year, Berrios showed the upside that he has playing that Crowder role. The real value here, like, there's 2. I want Elijah Moore. I want Michael Carter. But I have a feeling, Pat, that similar to CeeDee Lamb last year, and I'm not saying he's going to go as high, but I have a feeling by the time we get to August, Elijah Moore's draft capital is going to be so ridiculous that we're basically buying peak return.
He's another guy that I could potentially keep. The rebuilding year could not have gone better, Jake, especially with some of the moves that have been made, like especially if Watson goes to the Saints, because that same red shirt tag I have on Etienne, I have on Freiermuth, and I have on Michael Thomas, who no one wanted to draft. So I have him in like the 6th round. But I also traded Jalen Waddle, who he can keep in the 1st round this year, for Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore, who are like back-end keepers. All of a sudden, Russell Wilson goes to Denver. It's like, all right, Jerry Jeudy. Now we're doing a little bit better here than he was with Drew Lock at the time. So I want to talk about Denver. How does this impact their offense? Because I'm kind of with you that you can't really upgrade Russ too much if he's not running, because the situation really hasn't changed for him. He has 2 capable receivers, a pretty good tight end, and a good running game to go along with it. I think the offense is going to be better than it was in Seattle overall, but I don't think his fantasy numbers are directly impacted. He'll be about the same, maybe slightly more efficient, slightly better. But Sutton and Jeudy, potentially Patrick, and Big Albert.
There you go.
Albert O's got to be the big winner here. I'm going to have to learn his last name.
Okuwebunam.
It's not sticking.
You don't care.
It's
You
not,
really don't.
It's not sticking.
Oku.
Weibu.
Nam.
There's 2 Weibus in there? It's Oku, Weibu, and
No. I was like repeating to like emphasize it.
Oh.
So Oku, Weibu, Nam. Just remember like the ku and the boo sounded like, so now you just get, here, you gotta remember okay and kubu. Oku, Weibu, Nam.
So this was a big win for Albert O in terms of the tight end rankings. Of all the other guys that we've talked about so far, except for maybe Irv Smith. Like, I feel like Irv Smith and Big Albert O are above the Ingrams and the Jets guys and Njoku in terms of ones I would want to potentially take a flyer on as to be like a top 5 tight end. I think it's plausible. The problem with Wilson is they're going to sign some jabroni no one's ever heard of, and that's who Wilson's going to throw touchdowns to.
No, so I'm not that worried about it. I was glad that you brought in Tim Patrick's name, because I was going to say, argumentatively, you could say he's got a better depth in Denver now, because Tim Patrick is significantly better than anything he's been dealing with as a 3rd wide receiver for Seattle for some time. I think you, as of today, would easily argue that career and performance-wise, DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett are better than Cortland Sutton or Jerry Jeudy. We know their upside, Sutton and Jeudy, and we know I was going to say prolifically. That's not the right word. Profilery, whatever it might be. Jeudy fits Lockett. Sutton fits Metcalf, and not 100%. They're kind of like more like 90% fits, which would lean a lot of people, and deservedly so, to say the ceiling and the one I probably want is Jerry Jeudy, because he can freelance a little bit more as Russ extends plays, and then all of a sudden you hit that big play over the top as Lockett gets behind all the defenders. And then, Sutton is DK Metcalf. And I could see that. I think that makes a lot of sense. But I think that I say like the community as a whole is kind of overlooking the impact that Tim Patrick might have. And that's why I have Jeudy and Sutton and still in the 20s. I have Jeudy slightly in front of Sutton, but they're not in the teens like Metcalf and Lockett were, because I think Patrick's a factor. And I agree with you about Okuwebunam and the fact that I put him, I think, at tight end 13 or 14, because it comes down to the 3 receivers, and that even Gerald Everett, that brief spell, was only, so valuable as a low-end tight end 1, and I just don't know that Albert O can get to top 10, so I'm with you as a flyer, but similar to what I was just saying with the situation with Elijah Moore, I feel like just watching Twitter and watching everybody go bananas, especially because Fant got traded away, he's going to be drafted as a top 10 tight end. And at that point, I'm just like, that's that dead zone I'm talking about. Like, if he's tight end 8, 9, I'm skipping that part of the draft.
1-word answers, yes or no. Actually, this one doesn't work for yes or no, but 1-word answers.
No.
Sutton or Jeudy?
Jeudy.
Is Judy a top 20 wide receiver?
No.
Okay, so he's in that Amare range then.
Yes.
And Sutton would be top 30 probably. Maybe 35.
Yes.
Okay. I think we're reading the tea leaves here. Seattle, we don't really know what they're doing, but they have playmakers. I guess Drew Lock starting for them.
Pete Carroll said he saw Drew Lock as, like, Pete Carroll's full of crap.
Obviously, it's a downgrade. Is it a downgrade to them, or is Drew Lock just going to be chucking bombs to these guys?
Well, yeah, I think that's where it's not as much as a downgrade as everybody's going to make it out to be. Drew Lock, clearly, you do numbers, you do play, whatever you need to look at to see. We all know what Lock is versus Wilson. And the one thing he has over Wilson for fantasy purposes is similar to the Heineke thing. He's more aggressive, and he's more aggressive downfield, more aggressive. So, does he complete 15% fewer passes? Like, that's a huge number. Maybe if you can get 10%, the aggressiveness of the big plays offsets it some, but it would still be a downgrade. Where we're talking about DK Metcalf as a low-end wide receiver 1 and Lockett still being that mid wide receiver 2 who can finish as a wide receiver 1, but a little bit more touchdown reliant, big play reliant, as I was just talking about with Russell Wilson extending plays and that connection that they had. Obviously, Lockett's not going to have the connection he had with Wilson with Locke. So, yeah, I put them very much in a similar range of the Broncos wide receivers now. They kind of fall into the same group. I think I would still go Metcalf over both, but then I think I would take both Broncos guys before I came back to Lockett, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that does. The gap between Lockett and Metcalf, I do think gets a bit pronounced when you have a lesser quarterback, a less efficient quarterback at the helm. And maybe we're completely wrong about that because maybe just play it every other week. If you can somehow get both of them, figure out their schedule of when they're going to be good, that could be the way to go about it. The Bills did some intriguing things, mostly defensively at this point. We don't normally talk about defense here, but this is the absolute most, hey, we're going to try to win the Super Bowl this year or next year. That's our window. Let's sign Von Miller to an outrageous deal as a 32-year-old.
I was going to say the other team that did that was the Chargers, but yes, the Bills, wow, when that contract came through, hey, I think it was Schefter that tweeted, or it was either Field, like the first ever defender to get $200 million contracts. And as you said, at 32 years old, this is definitely like maybe a third year, Pat. But yeah, you are 100% right. This is like, we're going for it. We want to win this now, if not soon, like 2 years, 3 years at the most. But yes, this defense, a little bit concerning for matchups. If you see like opponents facing them, biggest thing that they needed was some more pass rush, and they essentially got it in Von Miller. But yeah, the Bills are going to be a hell of a lot of fun. I mean, they already were. They're just going to be a hell of a lot of fun next year. So are the Chargers, honestly. I think we need to include the Chargers in this same conversation. Yeah,
they haven't done enough on the offensive side of the ball besides re-sign Mike Williams to do much. In terms of our conversation today, they're who they're going to be. And I think their defense got a lot better. But on the Bills' offensive side, there's one name that was really intriguing to people. Well, one was McKissick didn't go there. Thus, theoretically, Devin Singletary should retain some of the value that he saw towards the end of the season. Obviously, he was a lot better than Zach Moss was, and Matt Breida, for that matter, and he started catching passes at the same time, too, and taking away a lot of those goal line opportunities from Josh Allen to try to keep him healthy. Now, in the playoffs, just turn the ball over to Josh Allen. That's what you're preparing him for all year long, is to go full tilt in the playoffs. Don't get hurt during the regular season. Win enough. Put up the stats. That's all gravy. It's playoff time that we're looking for here. So Kumaro and Isaiah McKenzie are both back with the team. Who cares? People started talking about O.J. Howard like that was going to affect Dawson Knox. It's not. O.J. Howard's there to block. He is one of the best blocking tight ends in football.
I know. I saw a lot of the same thing. They're like, hey, this could be what we always thought O.J. Howard could be. And remember the excitement and whatever. And I had the same reaction you did, Pat. It's like, remember why O.J. Howard got buried and split time with Cameron Brate and that's the whole argument we were having in fantasy at the time is like, yeah, we would love more O.J. Howard, but he's asked to block way too much because he's too damn good in the blocking game to his fantasy detriment. Got him a nice contract, but yeah, I'm not worried about Knox. I mean, maybe I'll ding Knox a spot or two just because there's somebody now who could potentially just take some snaps away on the field because they aren't going to run a lot of 12. So that's the thing, and just opportunity for Knox. But I'm not that worried about Knox. I'm not excited at all for O.J. Howard. To go back to the running back situation, I tell you what, I've had this feeling the entire offseason, Pat, and who, if they draft like they get their new Spiller. Remember CJ Spiller? They get the Isaiah Spiller or even Walker, or they just basically they draft like a day 2 running back. They probably don't do it in the first round, maybe. Oh my God. Like I know everybody's excited for Singletary, but if they got somebody like that kind of a bell cowie, and I'm not, yes, Josh Allen takes some value out of this backfield no matter what, but you brought up Spiller or Singletary, and I'm saying this is why. As of today, yes, Singletary is a very intriguing RB2 because we saw how good he could be if given a lot of the opportunities. I still don't think he's a true bell cow for the entire season, and that's why I'm bringing up these names, because if they do get a bell cow type talent, like a Javonte Williams from last year's draft in this year's draft, all of a sudden we now do really like a Bills running back, and I think that's intriguing to watch. Of course, that's still a month plus away, but I'm just bringing that up as a sidebar. As in, I would put it this way: I would sell Singletary if I had him in Dynasty right now. His value will never be higher, in my opinion.
The Cowboys don't bring anyone new in, but they get rid of 2 key pieces of the receiving game and condense them a little bit more. Now, maybe what they did in the draft last year to try to rebuild some of their wide receiver depth, or just basically add to it, so they could get rid of Amari Cooper. But now you have CeeDee Lamb. Michael Gallup has been brought back coming off the injury, so I'm assuming he's going to be okay after getting $57.5 million with $23 million guaranteed. Schultz has put on the franchise tag. How do you see the pecking order in this offense going without Wilson, Cedric Wilson, and Amari Cooper around now? It's going to be Lamb. Is he a top 5 receiver without those guys around?
I still don't think he quite gets there.
Okay.
I think we just saw last year, especially Lamb.
Is Schultz a top 5 tight end?
I think that's more likely. I have Schultz I think I had him at like 6 or 7 after these moves, and then we saw how clear this was going to be. And hey, Schultz did finish there last year. We also had hurt TJ Hawkinson, hurt George Kittle. I think he's definitely in that second tier of tight ends conversation. Like not the Kelsey, not the Andrews, but that next group. I think you put him in that conversation. It's clear. As of today, he is no question the 3rd option at worst. And you said Gallup. I've seen some reports out there that say he might be like Barkley last year. And granted, Barkley, before he rolled his ankle on the Dallas defender of all teams, he was starting to look like he was getting back to 100%. So I'm saying, like, we could get Gallup by the end of September, but there's some reports that saying you might not get 100% Gallup until the middle of the season. And I bring that up to say not just the Schultz excitement, which is definitely valid in what you're talking about, but as of today, if they don't draft the wide receiver again, that Simi Fehoko or Noah Brown. I'm a Fehoko guy, but it's definitely not clear as of today. I don't even know if you saw the field last year, but whoever wins that 3rd wide receiver role, or if they draft somebody that's better than both of them, that person's going to be very intriguing to me, because what is Gallup to start the season? And, could they make an impact and make such an impact that once Gallup is 100%, it's what we saw last year, where like Gallup still has value as the wide receiver 3. It's more inconsistent, but it's still somebody that you would want in fantasy.
Let's move to the Lions, who are returning the Goof as their quarterback. That's always fun. But they did sign DJ Chark, who...
Yeah.
Why... If you could sign DJ Chark to 1 year, $10 million, what in God's name is Jacksonville doing signing Christian Kirk and Zay Jones? What was happening in Jacksonville?
That's the bat crap crazy part of Jacksonville, 100%. Is like that. It just made 0 sense to me. I'm legitimately excited about DJ Chark in Detroit, and it has nothing like, yeah, I've always liked DJ Chark, so people are like, oh, you, but I put this in the article. Yes, we don't like Jared Goff. Jared Goff as a real life NFL quarterback, it's not that great. We all saw that Sean McVay was the magic behind him. However, even so, for 3 straight seasons, Brandon Cooks and Robert Woods, 80 plus receptions, 1,200 yards each. The next year, 90 receptions, 1,100 yards each for Kupp and then Woods, and then 90 and 900 plus yards, which is a little bit of the down year, each for Kupp and Woods. And I say each because they both did it both times every single year. His minimum, if you want to take the minimums from all that, his minimum for his top 2 wide receivers is 80 receptions and 900 yards. Floor. Those guys usually got past the receiving yards. Yes, Hawkinson's better than anything that Goff had. Tyler Higbee had one really good season, not one good season in that mix. So do I think they both get to that? Obviously, Chark and Amon-Ra St. Brown is who I'm talking about here. Do I think they get to 90 and 1,100 each? No, but if you told me 80 and 900 yards as the floor, yeah, with Hawkinson in that mix. So both wide receiver threes with Chark and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, Goff is not terrible for fantasy purpose because he also likes to hone in on two guys and stick with his two wide receivers.
They also re-signed Khalif Raymond and Josh Reynolds. And Reynolds was looking okay after he left Tennessee and went there. As one of the, I think that Reynolds is more likely to stick as the wide receiver 3 slot type guy, or the guy that moves around the field. Well, Raymond will continue to be used on special teams and potential deep 3 play. Yeah. I actually don't mind this offense. I'm with you. I don't think Chark takes away from St. Brown at all, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so let's rapid fire through the rest of the... Most teams haven't really done anything. Like, we can't really speculate on the Watson stuff because he could go to a bunch of places. But let's talk about the Bucs, because obviously Antonio Brown is gone. Brady is back. Godwin signed a new deal. And then they get Russell Gage. Could they have 3 top 30 wide receivers again?
I don't think so. I think
Really?
Russell Gage for fantasy purposes. Yeah, I think Russell Gage would be a lot more fun if he was just stuck with Atlanta for fantasy purposes, because we saw what he could be. I think it's a better real life signing than fantasy. I mean, we're talking about, like, I mean, look at the names just in this show alone that we talked about in the 30s. I'd say 40s for Russell Gage. And if Godwin or Evans missed time, he could jump up into the 30s and have some very productive weeks.
Should we rank him that way? Where Mike Evans is no beacon of health by any means, and he'll miss like a game, 2 games, then he'll leave a few games and screw you over. But he'll get to his 1,000 yards and he'll be excellent, top 20 guy. And then you have Godwin coming off this injury. Like, if you try to play into that there could be injuries on this team, I have no reason to think that Gage wouldn't be like a top 25, top 20 receiver if one of those guys didn't exist, and we might be dealing with that for 6 games a year. I think that has to be factored into his ranking a little bit. Just a little bit.
A little bit, but I mean, we're still talking about the names. I mean, we put Sutton outside the top 30. Like, there's a lot for that to break right, but what your point should be, and what everybody should remember, is that instead of drafting bench depth, which is the mistake people do every single year, is like, oh, I could use this guy during the buys, blah, blah, blah. No, you look for opportunities like this, where you take Russell Gage in the 10th round, and then all of a sudden Godwin's not ready for week 1, or Evans hurt week 2, and all of a sudden you do have a top 25 wide receiver, and that's the way the more think about it.
Arizona gets rid of Edmonds, re-signs 2 tight ends in Ertz and Max Williams, who was injured. That's why they ended up coming back and getting Zach Ertz in the first place. Now they have 2 tight ends that they're probably not going to throw to. I guess they threw to Ertz. They hated throwing to Max Williams.
Ertz was tight end 5 after he got there.
That's crazy. And did he score a touchdown, or he had that one game with the 2? Or was that before he left?
Yeah, he had the... I thought he had 1 or 2, but he was over 9 points, fantasy points per game since getting there. And actually, if you did that over the full season, 9 points per game would get you about tight end 8 for the year.
But the big thing is they re-signed James Conner, 3 years, $21 million,
Yeah.
$16 million over the first 2 years. He's their guy. And they don't really have anyone else right now, and that might change in free agency or through the draft or whatever. But let's say it's very unlikely that he walks into a split situation, at least, unless they go really high in draft capital during the draft, that he's probably pencil him in for at least the 60% role in this backfield. That's pretty good.
There you go. I was going to say 60%, like, I wasn't going to go bell cow. There's a lot. I mean, they could take, there's another one. You could take the other Cook. I'm trying to think of who else. I'm going off my list here. I'm thinking pass catchers. Pierre Strong, Batty. Like, there's other guys who could step in and be Chase Edmonds if they don't think Benjamin can be Chase Edmonds. The 60% is, I think that's a realistic number, because even if they do draft somebody, the names I just mentioned, those are likely day 3 picks. Those are likely the Benjamin, Chase Edmonds, when healthy, role, like the pass catching roles to mix in and not let Connor touch the ball 80% of the time. So what it comes down to is, what do we believe for the touchdown upside? Similar to Ezekiel Elliott, the touchdowns are just going to be there. Like James Conner, Ezekiel Elliott, depending on what the Cowboys do, Derrick Henry, and maybe 1 or 2 other, like, they're very few running backs you can project aggressively and say 10 plus rushing touchdowns. And Connor, if healthy, and I know, big question mark, but if healthy, he's going to score double-digit touchdowns. And that's why he'll probably be drafted as a mid RB2, deservedly so given the risk. But if he plays 15 out of the 17 games, likely finishes as a top 10 running back.
And when we talk about the 60%, unless they do actively go target a running back high end in the draft. I'm saying that 60% is the downside. That's probably best for him keeping on the field the entire season, but I would say that's his floor. He could play 75% of the snaps. And like you mentioned, unless Kyler gets back to running Kyler this year, and we really haven't seen that for any of the past 25 games or so, like very occasionally is he going to break one off, but he's not running 13 times a game anymore. And he's certainly not calling his own number at the goal line as much as he was doing, at least in the first half of not last year, the year before, when he was the best fantasy player there was. So James Conner is going to get those touchdowns. Yeah, he could be a top 10 guy, no problem. Like, I would say it's a 50-50 chance with everything situated right now that James Conner outscores Nick Chubb, despite the fact that James Conner is nowhere near being as good as Nick Chubb.
I would put it higher, honestly.
Okay. All right, so that's where we're at with all these guys.
Yeah.
Any other signings that we missed you think we should talk about?
I'm scrolling down. Like I think you mentioned legitimately everybody.
Everyone. I tried to get through all the good ones. And there's the stuff we don't know.
did,
Like, obviously, Carolina's offense or the Saints' offense or Atlanta's offense could look markedly different in an hour's time if Deshaun Watson goes there.
Well, Carolina, as we're doing this, Carolina, Joe Pearson of The Athletic, the Panthers are out on Deshaun Watson without a Hail Mary.
All right, so it's Atlanta or New Orleans, probably New Orleans is our guess.
Yeah, as you mentioned. Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
Michael Thomas top 10?
Hey, like as ornery as a person he is in real life, like, hey, fantasy-wise, I don't care about it. Like fantasy production, I wouldn't say top 10, but I'd say rebounding top 20, almost a lock, and top 15, you might get me to say a lock. Top 10's a little bit aggressive just because it's been so long since he's been on the field.
So let's say top 20 lock with the potential to be the best receiver in fantasy football.
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
Maybe he'll run something other than a slant. Who knows?
Well, no, that's what I was about to say. Is like I think Watson, not that he can't throw downfield, obviously. I actually think Watson. Everybody's about to like, no kidding, Jake, but like Watson's better as much as Jameis is a great fantasy value for wide receivers because of his aggressiveness. Like Watson is better for Michael Thomas because Michael Thomas doesn't run 20-yard routes all the time. So I'm saying like as much as Winston would be better than what the Saints were doing at quarterback, obviously with Taysom Hill, he would be a boost-ish for Michael Thomas. Deshaun Watson would be a clear, huge boost. And I think, you would say that about any quarterback that's going to throw more of those routes than just trying to chuck it up downfield.
All right. So I'm keeping Michael Thomas as a redshirt keeper is what you're telling me here. If Deshaun Watson goes, I guess it doesn't matter who.
How many keepers can you have?
I can only have 3, but I get one of the red shirts for free, so I can have 4. So I'm in a real conundrum here because I have great keepers.
I see that.
I also have Javonte Williams as a redshirt keeper as well. I tanked last year, like tanked.
Very clearly, you did it very well.
I did. I didn't do the thing where I tried to compete. I was like, no, I'm just going to draft first and second year players at good keeper value, and I'm not going to play them all year because I need flexibility here. I have 3 first-round picks. Like, it should be a good year for me, theoretically.
I like it. I like it a lot. Does everybody hate you?
Well, it's the first year I've ever done this in the 13 years. Usually I try to compete and try to make the playoffs and then get bounced in like the semifinals.
Oh, so you have a history.
Yeah, I have a history in this league of not doing this. I finally said, screw it. This is what I'm doing this year. Here's my buy-in. I'm going to win. I didn't even come in last. I came in like third last or something like that because I ended up with like Elijah Moore, who was good for like 4 weeks at a time. So I just tried to I basically just cast a very wide net and be like, I hope 5 of these guys hit. And then I have some trade equity. I have some good keepers, and I can really utilize my top-end picks. And that's the blueprint of what I'm doing right now. We'll see how it works out. What do you got going on at theathletic.com for the rest of the week and early next week? You're fired. Yeah, so is that what you're going to say?
Yeah, 100% fired. Baseball. I know you're rolling your eyes. I know, exactly. Full swing. Like, legitimately, I've been finishing projections, sending them to Nando, and within 10 minutes, somebody else signs or gets traded. It's the most infuriating thing ever. But I'm doing that, and I'm covering the NFL free agency at the same time. As soon as free agency is over, I'll do a small rankings update on the site because the biggest one is going to come after the draft. Please, if you're smart, do not draft between now and the end. Like, just wait for the NFL draft. I know everybody gets excited, but you're torpedoing your own picks. But that's what's coming. And then the podcast, of course. But yes, that's what we're doing. A lot of free agency, baseball and football, and then lots of football.
Jake, looking at the demographics of my show, the ages of people watching to this and listening to this aren't 65 to 80, so I think that you don't need to be too worried about people doing their fantasy baseball drafts.
I said fantasy football. That's what I was saying.
I thought you were saying fantasy baseball. Either way, we
I was
saying
like,
we gotta get out of here. We gotta get out of here. Thank you all for watching. Follow Jake on Twitter at AllInKid. Smash the like, give me your favorite signing down in the comment section. Sub to the Mayo Media newsletter and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please, that would help us out very much. Or sub to the audio podcast if you just prefer not to look at me, which would be crazy, and just listen to me and Jake at the same time. But that'll do it for us. Until next football time, next week. I'll see you then. I'll see you next time.
Fat Mayo Experience! Experience!